Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the June 6th regular meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. May we please have roll call?
Commissioner Ahmed, Commissioner Kuznick,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace, who's absent, it should be Vice Chair Wallace, and then Chair Alpert.
I am here. Okay. Why don't we do the Pledge of Allegiance? If I could ask Dave to come down and lead us in the pledge.
For those that are able and willing to stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Dave, why don't you come back up? Item number 3.1 is the swearing of our newest commissioner, and our city clerk, Joan, will swear in Commissioner Dave Curtis.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Dave Curtis,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
on which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sign this. Now have you signed 2 copies?
Okay.
They have received that there.
Okay. Thank you, Joan. Welcome, Dave. And for those that are wondering, Dave was sworn in prior to our joint planning commission city council meeting that was a few weeks ago, or maybe last week. And this is a second one for the benefit of the viewing audience and his family. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, item 4 is public comment or written comments. At this time, members of the public may address the planning commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda. If you would like to speak, please fill out a speaker card located in the back of the room and submit it to the secretary. If you're participating remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak when public comment is being taken. Again, this is for items that are not on the agenda tonight. So that means nothing to do with the West Side concept review we're doing for the laborers camp. So do we have any speaker cards?
No speaker card for this item.
Okay, do we have any hands raised in the audience
No
Is there-
hands for this item.
Okay, and we did not receive any public comments.
No
unrelated.
written communication.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and close the public comment at this time? Item 5, additions and revisions, there are none. Item 6, the consent item, there are none. Item 7, approval of the minutes. These are the minutes from our May 16th regular meeting, and there was a small revision that was left up here. So other than that, if any of the commissioners have any comments and, or changes, if not, we can get a suggested motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve the minutes of May 16th, our
Okay.
regular meeting,
Press the
2023.
I second the motion.
Okay, then you can press the, 1 second. Second will show up. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
And then press your own button again.
And then you vote yes or no, abstain. Okay, and Commissioner Wallace is not here, so the motion does pass 4-0-0-1 or 4-0-1-0. Okay. We don't have our TV screens on above. I think they're going to come on
Here, that one, the sign was but registered you as absent.
On top, yeah. Nope, okay, we will move on. Okay, item 8, continued items after the close of the public hearing. There are none. Item 9, continued items, there are none. Item 10, new items, there are none. 11, there are none. Action items. Item 12 is a study session, and tonight we have a study session 12.1 on West Side Drive Development Plan Concept Review for the Laborers Union Housing Project. And we do have a presentation by Annalisa.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, I will be presenting the Laborers Union Housing Project Concept Review application. The project site is a 20-acre parcel located on the west side of West Side Drive. The parcel is surrounded by residential uses to the east and partial north, and open space to the partial north and west, and Centennial Park and an existing training facility to the south. The general plan land use designation is hillside residential and single-family low-medium density. And the project area is also located within the West Side specific plan and is designated open space. So as mentioned, the designation for the West Side specific plan is open space. The project site does encompass 2 housing opportunity sites. One of the housing opportunity sites on the east is single-family low-medium density. The housing opportunity site on the west is hillside residential, and the proposed project is entirely within the hillside residential under the general plan land use designation. So the project concept is proposing 25 residential units, 21 would be market rate single family units, and 4 would be below market rate attached units. Parking would be provided in 2- and 3-car garages for the single family units and 1- and 2-car garages for the attached units. The typical lot size is proposed at 7,500 square feet with 75-foot frontages. Minimum front, rear, and rear yard setbacks would be 20 feet, and minimum side rear yard setbacks would be 5 to 10 feet. The development would be accessed via private road from West Side Drive. So per the city's inclusionary housing ordinance, 10% of the total single family housing base units are required to be below market rate units. The applicant does have the option to pay an in lieu fee equivalent to the 10%. The project proposes providing the units on site as 4 below market rate attached units, where 2 would be required for the 21 units. The applicant has not yet specified an income level distribution for the units, but the ordinance requires that the units be made available to moderate or lower income households. So here's the constraints map. The dotted line in orange is the urban growth boundary. The project is located within the urban growth boundary. It is also within a fault zone, and the setback for the fault zone is shown in the red dotted line. The project area is also within a minor ridgeline area that per the general plan may be altered by grading. Here we have the proposed site plan. The development would be accessed via a private road off of West Side Drive. Potential future stormwater basins are shown in the bright green along West Side Drive near an existing stormwater basin. The attached units are shown numbered 7 and 8 and 10 and 11. Existing native oak trees would be protected, and a potential trail would connect Centennial Park to adjacent open space and potentially providing a link to East Bay Regional Park District land. There are open space dedication and clustering requirements for the proposed density that is required per the general plan, and that would be evaluated as part of the formal application. For this 25 proposed units, the applicant would need to provide up to 70% or more dedicated open space. So this current project area would need to be expanded. The applicant has provided a few photos, samples of potential architectural designs. All of the buildings are proposed at 2 stories with front to rear splits and side to side splits intended to be constructed with the grade. So a few items for discussion. Does the commission support or have comments on the proposed location of the residential development off of the West Side Drive frontage? Does the commission support or have comments regarding the proposed building concepts and attached affordable units? And does the commission have additional comments or items to consider? And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Did the applicant want to do a presentation? They will.
The applicant has some words to share.
Okay, why don't we let you speak and then we'll ask questions of both of you at the end of that. So that works. Okay.
Hi, my name's Douglas Craw. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming on this project. We've been at it for 7, 8, 9 years, maybe longer. And this is the last opportunity on a 475 acre piece of land that's been whittled down and carved into open space and shopping center and houses. And we're down to the last 20 lots and last 20 or so acres. A couple of little clarifications on the history. This is an individual parcel, the 20 acres and the 20 some lots. We do have another total, this 20 acres, and we have like another 100 acres that we plan on addressing open space and park lands with. And then that will be the end of the labor's presence up there on the hill. I agree with the staff report. I think no disagreements with any comments in there. I have received some public comment on the trail, the proposed trail, which as a point of notice, that was my idea and it went over really badly. So I can almost for sure say that trail will be going. We're not here to fight. We have a long history on this property of working with the East Bay Regional Park District and the city, and we plan on continuing to do so. And in the past, you know, we deeded 175 acres over to the Park District before. As part of the urban growth boundary and the lot lines adjustments and all these things that have the history of this piece. So other than that, I'm ready to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Questions, clarifying questions at this point before we open public comment? Okay, sure, Dave.
Yeah, I do have a question. Considering that this is built close to a fault line that's in there, and the proposal only shows one exit route coming out, which goes across that fault line. What can we do to ensure some type of emergency if an emergency situation arose that these 25 housing area or residential area would be able to get out if that one access route is blocked?
Well, the number of units, 21 or 25, however it ends up, does not dictate a second EVA. However, we could provide one off the end of the cul-de-sac and go the other way or go out toward the park. Either way, we have a lot of flexibility up there on the hill.
Thank you.
So just a
Go ahead.
yes on. But then that extra access would also, do you envision any parking congestion? No, sorry, streets congestion, because you're one road accessing the whole development.
Correct.
You know, with school in the morning, I see one cul-de-sac and then people leaving for exit, they enter from one side and they leave from same side, right?
Correct.
Right.
Same egress. and
Yeah,
access,
same,
yeah.
yeah. Do you envision so any traffic study done, or do you envision any congestion there in the morning or in the afternoon? Is there any way to have another exit out or entrance in?
We could look at that, certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
For this and addressing the same thing.
yeah.
Commissioner Kuznec?
I do have a quick question. We saw how big the lots were, but as far as I recall, I don't remember seeing any numbers on housing sizes. Is there
A little early for that, probably. You know, the world's changing all the time. I would, if you wanted an answer today, I would say they would probably average 3,000 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Any question, any others? Okay, I do have a few, and I think it might be for staff. Just for the benefit of us, this area is governed by a West Side specific plan, a general plan, a zoning ordinance. Could you just explain how all those work together for this project? And which ones take precedence, or how do we think about all of them working together?
So the project would need to first conform with the general plan. Again, the West Side specific plan is designated open space. So the residential use as proposed would require a specific plan amendment. The project site is a housing opportunity site. It does require clustered development. So while the project would need to meet the standards of the West Side specific plan, there is some conflict there because clustered development does allow for smaller lot sizes as a result of the higher density within a smaller clustered area.
And so maybe a follow-up question. So the general plan has some write-up on, hillside residential as part of the land use element. And there's also a chapter 8, open space and conservation. And then there's similar language, but not exactly the same in the West Side specific plan. So in those cases, do we follow the standards and guidelines in the specific plan or in the general plan for this?
I believe those details would need to be ironed out during the specific planned amendment process, but.
Yeah, I can weigh in a little bit. Yeah, so there's been a policy in place for many years that talked about updating the West Side specific plan. So there are some inconsistencies throughout the plan that would need to be addressed. We've done some amendments over time related to individual properties such as the El Nido House. At that time, the inclusionary ordinance reference was changed. So the inclusionary standards are now consistent with citywide standards, but there's still some other areas where it's either silent or it just needs additional clarity. I would also mention that as a practice, the zoning ordinance tends to be implemented when a specific plan is silent in terms of standards, resource standards and the like. So it's sort of a hierarchy. We work our way down toward implementation.
Matt, go ahead.
But the specific plan is not silent in this case.
Not in the sense of a land use.
No.
Yeah, that's why it needs to be amended, is because it was never upgraded to match what the general plan said.
And what's the process for the amendment? Like what does it take?
We have a unique process in San Ramon. Under state law, you're required to amend a general plan in the same way, a specific plan in the same way as a general plan. So an application would be filed. We go through the technical analysis for code compliance, environmental compliance, and then you're going to get 3 hearings before the Planning Commission and through the City Council. Oftentimes, we will do joint meetings to consolidate introductions to the project and discussion topics, but ultimately, there needs to be a lot of transparency and opportunity for public comment on any change to a specific plan.
Okay, great, thank you. There's a mention in the staff report that we'll follow the West Side design guidelines when we review the project in the future. And are those the guidelines that are captured like in the appendix of the West Side study plan? There's like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9 pages of details about thou shalt do this or that. Is that what we should be thinking about when we look at this from a
Yes.
design guidelines? Okay, good.
And the West Side specific plan is an older plan, so there are some design guidelines that are kind of mentioned throughout.
Okay,
the plan.
okay. Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead. No. Please.
Are design guidelines only in a specific plan? They never show up in general plan?
typically, the design guidelines are specific objectives to obtain. The general plan is general in nature. There's often advisory language in a general plan, but it's usually not as detailed as design guidelines. In the case of the West Side Plan, there was a lot of attention given to the nature of the topography of the area, stepped foundations and the like. And so that's a lot of what will govern it. In addition, there are also standards that in the zoning ordinance that relate to protection of oak trees and resource protection. And those would come in as, since they're not specifically called out in the specific plan, but are applicable citywide.
Yes, so just to amplify, the appendix has, some pretty thorough design guidelines, to follow, everything from grading to buildings to landscaping. And I was just making sure those are the ones that we'll ultimately be reviewing the project against. And I think I got the answer to yes, but there's some others maybe scattered throughout the document, but it's the West Side Civic Plan that will kind of.
I would also add, though, that this is one of the older specific plans. And so there's an awful lot of state law and regulations for stormwater, for grading operations and resource protection. So all of that will trickle in, even if it's not specifically called out.
Okay. And Lisa, you mentioned cluster development. Could you explain for us what that means?
So cluster development is a development in which units are placed in closer proximity than would typically be permitted. For example, in the West Side specific plan, the hillside provisions require 10,000 square foot lots. So in this case, due to the cluster development, we may have smaller lots, could potentially be increased in lot size, but not used the same way. But the cluster development is more of a just concentrated.
Okay, so it brought the 25 units into what we would think of a normal neighborhood versus scattered throughout.
Versus a
the whole West Side.
sprawl, yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Just as an example, at the low end of the density range, it's 1 unit per 5 acres. And so by clustering them into smaller footprint, you then open up the requirements for open space, but there's some economy of scale in working in a more compact development pattern.
That makes sense. Thank you for that. That makes total sense to me. The question of land to be dedicated to open space. I think I didn't write it down. There's some number of acres that we'll end up dedicating as part of this project in order to meet the density and the required. Is that correct?
Right. The applicant has not provided those numbers, but per the general plan, at the density that they're proposing for the 25 units, they would need to dedicate more than 70% of the project site to open space. So the project site would need to be increased by, at the 25 acres, roughly it's 35 acres.
Okay. Okay. So we think about like, so that if it's 100 acres and 70% is open space, to get 30 acres to build, you need 70. Okay. And then is the location of the open space is it contiguous with the property, the project, or is it other places surrounding the West Side? Or is that to be determined, or,
I think part of the detail has to be worked out. There is some policy language that talks about allowing dedication within proximity for preferred parkland and things like that. In this case, because the property owner has contiguous ownership, it's really going to be a question of what piece gets dedicated.
got it.
And then, as the applicant mentioned, there are also parkland dedication requirements, open space dedication or open space fee requirements that could also be worked into dedication requirements. And so there's an opportunity to kind of consolidate this with the resources that the labor's property has.
Perfect. And then is it anticipated that the land that will be dedicated open space is also within the urban growth boundary, or does that not matter?
It actually doesn't matter.
Okay.
The other thing that I'll just mention about the open space dedication, it's not necessarily a requirement that it be dedicated to the city. It just needs to be preserved as open space. So there could be conservation easements and other things, but part of the discussions with the laborers most certainly will be maintenance responsibilities, public access, things like that.
Okay.
So those are all discussions that will have to be worked out.
Good. That totally makes sense. I think these are totally easy questions now. We had attachments to both East Bay Mud and DRSRD. Are they both involved in this project area, or is it one or the other?
East Bay Mud would be the provider, the water provider, and DR,
The
DSRSD would be sewer.
Okay, thank you. Talk about that. And I think Alicia, you mentioned that it's our inclusionary housing ordinance covers this project. There's nothing different because it's part of the West Side specific plan. So the one that we know is citywide. And I think you both said that. So
Yes.
just thank you for clarifying that. That is it from my questions. Thank you very much. Did any more questions pop up in anyone's mind at this point?
No.
Not we'll have discussion. We'll open public comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have a question. So it talks about moderate to low income households. Do we know what that range is, or what it in terms of how we define moderate to lower income households?
That would be based on the current AMI,
Area median.
area median
Yep.
income.
Any other questions at this point for either Annalisa or the applicant? No, thank you so much. I think it's great. Okay, why don't we go ahead and open public comment? Do we have any speaker cards?
We received written public comment from Gary Solani and Martin Barron, which were provided to the commission and are part of the public record. And I do have a comment card that has been requested to be read aloud. They do not wish to speak at the podium. I'm going to read it. We oppose the alignment of the trail. It should remain at least 100 feet from the property line of the circle and ranch of the Solani lot. And
Tried to communicate quite a bit in a relatively tiny space.
Yes, sure.
So I apologize. I'm T.W. Starkweather and my wife Jackie Starkweather. We own the Circle E Ranch. We have a few hundred acres contiguous to the labor union land. And we don't have any objection to the subdivision element, but we do have vigorous objection to the alignment of the trail, which actually, as it's shown, veers into our land. It actually goes right through Mr. Celini's lot. It goes right directly into where he's proposing to build a house. Now, when the East Bay Regional Park purchased land from the labor union, we had vigorous conversations, and we made it clear that we would need to oppose any trails that got within 100 feet of our property line. Let me explain that having an operating cattle and horse ranch within an urban area is quite a unique challenge. At least 4 or 5 times a year, the labor union calls me to tell me that somewhere between 80 and 120 head of cattle from my ranch is on their land. And it's because somebody decides to enjoy what they think is public land. They cut the fences. These are high tension 6-wire cattle fences, but they cut them all the time. So having public trails next to that ranch it's actually kind of dangerous. I've got at least 2 2,000-pound bulls, and the only difference between a bull and a rhinoceros is the different type of horn. They can kill you. They are serious creatures. And of course, we have horses, and horses are curious creatures, and they'll go wandering off. The point is, the trail alignment is a serious matter, and we hope that at the time that this moves forward, it would be given a reasonable consideration. And as I pointed out to staff, we own quite a bit of land that's got the same open space / specific plan issues. Now, mine's zone agricultural, so it would require some additional steps. But it should be pointed out that sometime soon after this is approved, I will be in front of you. I've got a lot more land than they do. And the whole point is, I would certainly like to subdivide my land. Now, I don't personally want to, But I have a granddaughter who's 6 years old, and I pray that about 80 years from now, she'll still be living on that ranch. She might want to. So I would only say that you can see what will happen. The floodgate with all the landowners in the area that have similar zoning are going to be very much monitoring this and hopeful that my friend Doug, who I hold in very high esteem, by the way, even though he did veer that trail to aggravate me into my land. But the whole point is when you modify a specific plan that about 30 odd years ago was drafted, it had a specific objective. And that was to preserve the view shed. And so they allowed homes to be built. And the idea was that view shed would be preserved in perpetuity. Of course, that seems like anymore that means 20 to 25-year cycles. Doesn't necessarily mean forever. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you for,
I have to go to church, so I have to excuse myself.
thank you.
No other
Okay,
speaker
we have one, I
cards?
think we have one more.
Oh,
Did you want to speak on this? Go ahead. Yes, please do. Please do. And just give the clerk your card afterwards. Yeah,
Yeah.
just afterwards. You can speak
Okay.
first.
Thank you. My name's Angie Rademacher. My husband Todd and I are here. We live at 5003 West Side Drive, 2 doors down from the proposed development. When we moved to San Ramon 24 years ago, our goal and desire was to live backing up to open space in San Ramon at the Oaks. That was our goal. At the time, we couldn't afford it, so we moved to a patio home at the Orchards, knowing that someday, if we saved enough, we could move up the hill. After years of skimping and saving, we finally accomplished our goal, and 14 years ago, we bought our current home. When the homes were being built, we visited often to talk to the realtors at the Toll Brother community, and they told us that if any future development would be happening along West Side Drive, it would be luxury homes on 1 acre lots on West Side Drive, not up into the hills. So you can imagine our disappointment when we got this card in the mail only 5 days ago. So we didn't have a lot of time to prep, that there would be streets going into the hills, low income housing, which I realize that San Ramon needs more low income housing. But if I understand correctly, we're doing low income housing in Bishop Ranch, at Windermere, at Marketplace. It's happening all over this area. And driving up here tonight on El Costa, they're doing a whole bunch of building where I think a church used to be. So all I can say is that our hill, 100 people a day walk, bike, jog up that hill for that open space, for the wildlife, for the beauty of the nature. We don't have a lot of that in San Ramon anymore, especially not on the west side. We have Las Trampas, but if you can't walk on dirt, if you have to be on a sidewalk, you can't do Las Trampas. We're like the last place on West Side Drive or west side of San Ramon where you can actually walk on streets, but see deer, turkeys, eagles. I mean, this is our last bit of open space, and it breaks my heart that we're getting ready to build on top of it. I'm sad. If it were homes along West Side Drive, that would be one thing, but to go streets up into the hills, there were a lot of neighbors that wanted to be here tonight that couldn't come because we only had a 5-day notice. We got this postcard in the mail 5 days ago. We struggled and saved to move up to where we're at. And if this housing development happens, we're going to have homes looking down into our backyard. And that is heartbreaking to me because we spent 24 years in San Ramon, and 9 of it was spent saving up for the home we're in now. We've put a bunch of money into that home. We've redone our backyard to pay homage to the beautiful view we have. And now we're going to have homes looking into our backyard. The laborers union land is so large, they could build wherever. And they're putting it right next to these luxury homes. So I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I went over and thank you
No,
for your
No,
time.
that's okay. That's okay. Could you remind me where is your house right now? It's
5003 West Side Drive. And it's Angie and Todd Rademacher.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Give
hearing.
the clerk your card. That would be helpful.
Stephen Lee,
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you for letting me talk. My name is Stephen Lee. I also live on West Side Drive. I lived there for more than 20 years, next door to Angie. Okay, I sort of echo what she said, but I'm talking about a little bit different aspect. I'm talking about the traffic and the traffic safety. As you may or may not know, the West Side Drive is supposed to be a 25, 35 miles. So I'm very happy our friendly police, staff is here. For whatever reason, that traffic speed limit is not really enforced. And I don't know whether we are aware on that part of the West Side Drive where the road is supposed to enter into a West Side Drive. It's the first time I see it. It's the steepest part of the road. And recently, and for the last few years, in fact, people has been speeding around that area, and I have witnessed a lot of near accidents. And also, we have a lot of young, energetic, citizens or whatever. They sort of just ski down, freestyle down that area. Right now, it's relatively okay because there's nothing on that side. Imagine, I saw that the whole weekend. They've been doing up and down there. So all the roads now enter on the east side of West Side Drive, okay? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, on that side, I don't know exactly the gradient, the technical gradient. I'm very concerned about the safety. And that road, for some reason, again, I don't have any statistics or any scientific proof. A lot of people using that road to test out their cars. Especially recently, there is a big Tesla charging station. Afterwards, occasionally, I can see some people just, go with the electric cars, which is a very good pickup coming up the road. So I don't know how it will happen if it's an emergency evacuation situation. There are schools around the area. There are some, students driving on that road. And again, there is very, very, very little traffic enforcement on that road. We have been talking about speed bumps, more speed signs, or at least some warning signals or something like that. And because there's a slight curve of the road, when I back out, I was hit, almost nearly hit a couple of times the last few years. So I'm not aware if any of you were actually on that road to see that road. It's a single, one lane on each side. And, last 2-3 years too, there were a huge amount of truck traffic too, but that is another story. I don't want to bring that up anymore. So instead of just repeating what other people have said, I just want to bring it up to all commissioners. And if you have not had a chance to see that road, it's a beautiful area. It's nice to take a walk, but it's also, some time of the day, it can be dangerous. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Did we have any other speaker cards?
no, there's speaker cards, but I do have a hand raised on Zoom.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and take that?
Hi, my name's David Sui.
Hi, go ahead. We can hear you.
Thank you. I live on Hearst Court, which is just east and down the slope of the proposed development. I'd like to state first that the primary goal of the West Side Plan was to, quote, literally reading off it, is preserve the open space character of the area. At the same time, create a high quality, attractive community of lasting value, which enhances the unique visual and scenic qualities of the area. While I can appreciate the laborers camp and Mr. Carra would like to build on this, I would also sort of point out that under Ordinance 197, which accompanies the West Side Plan, there are specific restrictions on building over elevations of greater than 500 feet in terms of density. And I don't know how the hillside residential plan factors into that, but simply lopping off the top of the hill and putting 25 high density clustered development units. And all due respect to the councilman who said there's an economy of scale, there's also an economy of ugliness associated with clustered developments. Doesn't necessarily protect what the West Side Drive, our West Side development plan, specific development plan was all about, simply by stuffing 25 high density units on the top of the hill. I'd also like to say that, the way the plan's developed currently is we're not looking at the fronts of houses that are well spaced. We're going to be looking into the backyards of 12 of those units. Is that really what we want to do in San Ramon, is put houses high on a hill and have us look at the back of those houses? Last thing I'd like to say is a couple of things regarding Mr. Craw's comments, as well as some of the characterizations in the briefing document that says this 20-acre site is quote unquote a remnant piece. It's not a remnant piece. You should go take a look for it yourself. It's a beautiful piece of land. And it's characterized as being a very private location. And I'm sorry, simply building 25 units on top of a hill for everyone to see is not a very private location. Last thing I'd like to point out is that there's already been what's characterized in the Open Space Committee horse trading in terms of the number of acres which are donated, which were characterized at a recent Open Space Committee as unusable canyon space. And so while I certainly understand the nature of what the development means to the laborers camp for the residents who live locally within the area, I think this is something that we all vehemently oppose. And I just wanted to put my comments on record. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Okay.
Call in user 1.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead. 3 minutes.
Okay. So I'm just curious. I don't live in that area, but I am empathetic to my fellow citizens' concerns and grievances that I've been hearing tonight. But I'm a little bit puzzled. We have great staff in the planning department as well as the traffic department. So why is it that no one had briefed the planning commissions on whether there are any traffic danger, per the words that I heard from Mr. Lee, because of the young, energetic new drivers there, mostly Tesla drivers? I think that needs to be authenticated. And that needs to be, brought up to more scientific, if you will, or like more factual, presentation, because it involves, like he said, a school, and also he was concerned about fire evacuation. Those are public safety that you guys should not turn a blind eye on. If you go ahead and allow this development to come to reality, later on, there is a, God forbid, a grass fire or a field fire, and these people got burned to death, you will be responsible for it. If I were you, and I'm not trying to, tell you what to do, because I'm just a nobody and you're the commissioners, but I'm just saying, if I were in your position though, I would definitely ask the staff to put in some sort of camera and observe that area. And furthermore, I really just have Mr. Bartlett's department to survey the security in terms of fire around that area before you give the go-ahead to the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any?
No other hands raised.
Okay, and no other speaker cards. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment. First of all, did you have any comments at this point? Otherwise, we'll just go into some of our comments. Okay, before we get started on our comments, I would like to say, and I'm going to ask staff to amplify, this is a concept review. And as a concept review, by design, we ask applicants to come in without all of the detailed studies. It's an early preliminary review of the project to make sure that they're on the right trajectory or course correct prior to investing significant time and resources on conducting studies. So the lack of certain studies is really by design. We don't expect to have them tonight. We don't, we do expect them with the final application, but tonight we do not. And that would include analysis of items such as traffic and such as intersections, as well as grading and everything else. So for those that are wondering why we don't have those tonight, that's my explanation. I'll ask staff if they have any additional words they'd like to say on the role and purpose of concept reviews.
No, I think you summed it up very well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, fellow commissioners.
May I ask a quick question, if I could, to the applicant, because one of the speakers commented on the design that you have shown us. I made the assumption in looking at this that the driveways, hence the driveways would be along the street, the garages,
Yes, ma'am.
and then the front door would be to the street. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so the backyards then are east-west. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That was, I just needed to be clarified there.
Okay. So we have a couple of ways to do this. We can provide some general comments, feedbacks, but we also have some leading questions from staff to make sure we do touch on them. So you can do it, we can do it together, we can do them separately, but we will come back to the 3 questions in the staff report to make sure we do touch them all. Does anybody have any initial comments they'd like to share? Thoughts? Commissioner Kuznick.
I do. So one of the things that we heard here tonight is the concept that this area has what are considered to be luxury homes, and certainly homes in this area would be considered that at this time. So one of the other challenges we have when we deal with affordable housing is, and it is actually in our housing documents, is that the units that the affordable housing units should be indistinguishable as in a development. And so one of the concerns that I have is that you have these 4 units. I think the word I've heard in other places are duplex. That will certainly not be in character with what will likely be some very nice homes in this area with, in fact, a killer view. So I think that for me is of some concern. At this time, I know we promote affordable housing in all of our locations, but this one just seems to not fit well in my first pass at this. So that's one of the concerns that I have. You look like you're ready to reply.
Well, just a real quick comment on whether you split those units vertically or horizontally. We can deal with the architecture, and it would be a challenge to differentiate them from the market rate units. I'll tell you, we're pretty good at that and have done it a lot.
Okay. That was my big contention at this point.
Other comments at this point? Not yet. That's okay. Go ahead, please.
Just, I'm not sure if this is the right process to follow, but the whole privacy thing of other neighbors around this development, if this is elevated on the hillside, is it possible for people living there and being in the backyard or in the second story to peep into other people's backyard?
Yes. Now, the proximity is pretty far away, and
So what is
we
that?
can deal
How much is that?
hundreds of feet.
Okay.
But we can deal with it with working with the owners with landscaping and orientation on the house and things like that, window locations. A lot of way to respect their privacy, and we haven't had any conversation with those people yet, but we will.
Like building up trees or planting something to give privacy
Yeah.
to both parties?
You can do it with landscaping, you can do it with the orientation of the house. Tweak the house one way or the other. You can eliminate windows on the side of a house that would cause you to look down in there. I think most of it would be the second floor, the yards. Will probably not be as problematic, easier to landscape, easier to shield.
And so I guess this is a question for the staff. What would we need to be put in place to ensure that if a developer comes, that is followed?
Well, essentially, it can be addressed through design review process, when we have a formal application. Typically, there are design guidelines and landscape requirements for both lighting as well as landscape screening. It's just a matter of coming up with a plan that would work. Additionally, we typically will require sightline studies to give an idea of the horizontal and vertical relationship between the existing and proposed. So all those things are yet to be analyzed. Mr. Craw's, statement that there's no way to guarantee is absolutely correct. Right now, you can look out your window and probably see your neighbor's house. And so it's just a matter of trying to find a workable solution.
Okay. I'll go ahead and make some comments, see if the fellow commissioners, on the case of, affordable housing in this development. And I would like to, if you come back, if you choose to go forward, I would appreciate exploring options under our inclusionary housing ordinance. Like Commissioner Kuznick, it didn't feel like these units would be indistinguishable per our general plan policies. And so, there are additional ways to address the affordable housing component, via our inclusionary housing ordinance. So, prior to coming back, I would like you to explore options with staff,
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I should back up on one step. I would also appreciate, I think, an additional concept review prior to it becoming an SB 330 project where we actually lose all of our freedom to make any kind of course corrections. Because as you all know, once it's qualified as a project under SB 330, our hands are severely limited on what we can and can't do with the project. So I would personally appreciate, given how early it is in the planning process, that I would like to see something come back slightly, after tonight, before it becomes SB 330 qualified, if that's possible.
Through the chair, just one point of clarification. Right now, we're working under the assumption that there would be a specific plan amendment,
Right.
which is a legislative act, therefore not subject to the SB 330 procedures. That said, there are other state laws and streamlining provisions that the applicant could consider. And then we do have our process in place for dealing with those types of applications.
Good.
And so
Perfect.
we would follow
Thank you.
that standard.
Thank you for that. So as we've heard, and I think we all feel the same, this area is pretty special in San Ramon. We all agree with that. What was difficult for me to understand was exactly where this project would be sited, because I'm standing on West Side Drive, and I did visit it several times, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners did as well. I couldn't tell, I kind of guessed where the road was based on the drawing, where it was going to hit West Side Drive. I couldn't exactly tell where the houses would be and what I'd be able to see from either West Side Drive or, Hearst Court or the nearest street up there, the ones that heads west, Tallis Court. So I think, should you come back, I think it would be very helpful for us to have some visual representation of what we're going to see, from the roads, because I do think we're all very concerned about the hills. And there's a lot of policies that are captured in the West Side specific plan, about grading and about sites and protecting trees and how we site the project. you know, with whether there's creeks or heritage trees or earthquake faults. So I just think having a better understanding of that would be very helpful for us when you come back.
I agree.
Yeah, and then similarly, I heard a couple of comments, so we had some in writing about the trail, you know, and where it's going, where it's stopping, you know, what properties it goes. And other than the staff report with the green lines there, I do appreciate the comments about not wanting cattle to get through and all that kind of stuff. Is the trail a requirement for this project, or is it what you started off as?
In all
feature?
honesty, it was we volunteered to put a trail in because we had done so much work with the park district and we see more work ahead of us with the park district. And that was my personal idea.
Okay.
Turned out not to be very good. So I think you could probably just take the trail off the conversation.
I'll let you work with staff on that because I did hear comments on that. Fire safety, access, public safety. We heard a comment there. I had this sort of the similar comment. You know, I think when it comes back before us, I'm going to assume, you know, the fire protection district will take a much closer look at the project, and they'll think about things like the road, and they'll think about things like secondary access. I like my fellow commissioners, you know, looked at it and thought it would be really simple to add a second access in and out of the project, whether it lines back up with the street or comes all the way back down to West Side Drive. But I think that would be a good thing. And I know that by the time it comes before us, the traffic engineers will also look at this. So not concerned about that. We got a comment on access to Centennial Park directly from this, other than through the roads. Was that an optional thing that we thought of, or was that a requirement? You know, because I think we got some feedback that felt that having a trail down to Centennial wasn't necessarily a good idea. Yeah.
I think we all agree on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is easy. Talked about fences, trails, you know. Those were my overarching comments, but I think having the visual representation of what people will see, I think will be really helpful, you know, when we get there. Okay. Other comments from my fellow commissioners?
I do have maybe it's a question more of a comment around the access road that's going in. Looking at the map, it's, you know, right on that burn or that turn that's on the West Side Drive. Is that placed there because of the grading, or is there another option for that road to be put somewhere else that's not in such a somewhat blind corner, maybe even further down West Side, closer to, is it Brewsterville, Rubberville Drive, where I see like it looks like there's a crosswalk and maybe a stop sign already there. Was it put there for grading, or is it?
No, I think, you know, just trying to respect the existing neighbors all around. And yeah, partly grading the detention basin, the retention basin there, which is going to get expanded anyway. So we could move that entrance to accommodate, you know, 100 feet either way.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from a safety perspective, if that is a road that is on a turn.
If it's that site distance issue, we should probably move it.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, staff will help you with that. Okay, other comments from commissioners in general, then we're going to go back to the questions, make sure we hit them.
So I just, I feel, I just want, you know, as part of my comments is that to the residents, both who were here online and in person, that yes, I am really familiar with this area. This is actually one of these locations that our little hiking group does urban hikes when it's raining. So we go up and down that hill a lot, and then up and down each of those courts. So it is an area I'm really familiar with. And so it is beautiful, and I certainly appreciate your concerns. And likewise, I grew up in a ranch, and our family used to get the phone calls for the livestock that was out at, you know, so I feel like it's old home week here. But I also want to point out that, you know, part of the siting of this is, and we haven't really talked enough about it, is this earthquake zone. And this is the first time I've encountered this being on a planning commission. So it would be nice if this comes back to us, is see maybe a few more documents in which there's an overlay of the earthquake zone with the potential residents and the roads and so forth. And I think that probably has much more of a controlling factor here than we've chatted about. Because looking at your road, it's really quite curvy, which seems kind of unnecessary, other than if you overlay the earthquake portion. I don't know if that factors into it. So that's that. I would actually suggest that where the cul-de-sac ends, if you ended it between lot 1 and 25 and had the entrance, at the corner where the existing house is in and come in that way, it seems like that would be an easier route in. But again,
As far as the history of the West Side Specific Plan, that earthquake zone is very well documented. Those easements are recorded documents. I've been involved in that west side for many, many years. And so we know exactly where the faults are, and we know where the setbacks from the faults are. And so far has proven to be accurate. We'll take a look at that though, and see if we can accommodate moving it around a little bit.
well, it's just, and I don't know if anybody else on the commission has dealt with a project that has been involved with the earthquake easement. So it's a new one for me.
Yeah, virtually West Side Drive is aligned
Yeah,
due to that earthquake
okay.
zone.
No, I appreciate it, but
Mhm.
it will factor in as we're
Yep.
going forward.
Okay.
But other than that, to the questions, if we're gonna go through
Yeah,
the
I was gonna
questions.
jump in. Make sure.
Support and comments of the location. I would like to, I'm here with Commissioner Alpert on this. I'd like to see a little more information about how this will site on that grade.
Absolutely.
That would be very, very helpful. I think we've talked about the building concepts and my concerns about that. And I've shared my additional comments. So
Mhm.
generally, I know it's hard for the neighbors to hear this, but this seems like a good spot for more luxury houses and nicer luxurious neighbors, shall we say.
Okay.
Okay.
Where'd you? Okay. 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 Thank you for your comments earlier. Okay, Commissioner Ahmed, do you have any? Okay. Commissioner-
Yeah, none at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think the citing of it, I think will be very helpful when we get to that. I think building concepts and attached affordable units, I think you heard even from at least 2 of the commissioners to explore options under our inclusionary housing ordinance, that we weren't necessarily comfortable with the notion of having multifamily affordable units in that area. As much as it pains me to say to give away affordable units, this might not be the right place for them, in the city. And then the additional comments, I think the secondary access into the project is important, understanding the trails, and it sounds like you're very amenable to, not starting an argument with anybody about having a trail. It was, there's no such thing as a bad idea, just ideas that don't get implemented, So thank you for that. As far as the architecture design, I know there's some samples here, I think, to be honest, I think the grading is probably going to dictate the landscaping or the architecture a fair amount with the stepped up design or side to side or up and down. So a couple of them, or at least 1 or 2 of them didn't really match that, but I have no doubt that, at the size that you're talking about, the architecture will blend in with the neighborhoods, and I think that will work. And just as a reminder, and staff probably will also suggest this, is that our ARB process, Architecture Review Board, is terrific at helping to refine that, so that if it works into your schedule, I think that would be a good thing to allow them to have an overlook at the project, because they really do. I've never attended one of their meetings where the project didn't come out better.
Well, I can tell you the architecture that we showed representative is a fair comment, probably wouldn't fit on those lots. But what they were was most of those pictures are from a project in Orinda that had that worked with the land the way we were trying to work with on side hill splits, working your way up the hill and back to front splits, so that you don't have houses sticking up on posts.
Perfect.
And that was really all we were trying to address there at this time.
And I think you did on the picture. So thank you for that. Thank you for even mentioning that was part of the design considerations. Other comments, Okay, well, we do look forward to someday seeing this again. And thank you for taking the time to spend with us on this.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, item 12.2. There has been a request to form an ad hoc committee for interviews for the Housing Advisory and Transportation Advisory. And I think out of fairness for our brand new commissioners, we won't ask you to participate in interviews, although you're probably the most fresh on interviewing somebody since you just were interviewed. So I will, and I've already made sure she was going to say, okay, so Commissioner Kuznick and I will take on the interviews for the next two committees. And we are looking forward to it. Okay, and do we have any liaison updates? So liaison updates are, we all attend various advisory committees as the liaison, and this is the time of the meeting where we actually share anything of interest that came up. And we'll work through all the assignments of that since you just got sworn in tonight, at a future meeting to, let you participate and join us, But with that said, Commissioner Kuznick, have you had any?
No, Parks meets next week.
Okay.
So it'll be at the next following meeting.
And I did not have any since our last meeting, although next week there will be an architecture review board meeting that I will attend and provide feedback on that. Okay, with that, Mr. Barr, it's your turn.
Okay. Either good or bad, we will be canceling the June 20th meeting. As well as canceling the July 4th meeting. Unless somebody really wants to forego fireworks and talk. We do have a meeting scheduled for July 18th. We'll be dealing with the election of chair and vice chair for the new cycle. We will also are working to get Chevron to come back and present some of their information about their the view sheds from Inverness Park and the like, do an informational presentation as well as a year in review. So
Great. Thank you. With no other comments, I think we can adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming out and sharing your thoughts. We do appreciate it.